Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the back to Race Week on the Monday after what was an incident-packed Tuscan Grand Prix. And also supporting the Tuscan Grand Prix, we had both the Formula 2 and the Formula 3 races. The Formula 2, a close Formula 2 season continued, and it got even... and the title battle continued to hot up whilst the Formula 3 season drew to a close and saw a new world champion. So, let's go in to the Road to F1 review, starting with the Formula 2. So, the Formula 2 race happened on Saturday afternoon after qualifying, and it was Christian Lundgaard who got pole, and he held the lead going into the first corner ahead of Dan Ticktum, who managed to maintain his second place, whilst Callum Ilott was swamped at the start and he dropped right down the order after a very poor launch and he was passed going into the first corner. Whilst here you have the two Carlins batting it out. Yuki Tsunoda was having a little bit of a tough race, but he was progressing his way through the field, whilst Robert Schwartzman, who had a bit of a bad start, he was now starting to progress his way through the field. As you can see, this is him managing to get past Jehan Daruvula, and this was at the time where the hard tyre runners started to gain pace and the soft tyre runners began to struggle. Christian Lundgaard pitted. Christian Lundgaard was actually the first car to pit. This left Lundgaard, it ticked him into the lead, but Luca Giotto then managed to get past the Dams driver. Once they both pitted, it was Felipe Drugovich who led the way, but Callum Ilott, who went very long on the softer tyre, managed to get past Drugovich and was in the lead. He actually exited the pits ahead of Ticktum, who managed to get ahead of Giotto in the stops. But he was quickly passed by first Ticktum and then Giotto. Robert Schwartzman was doing a reasonable job on that alternate strategy, but then his gearbox it seems like it was a gearbox problem, certainly some sort of a technical problem, and it sounded like a gearbox failure. And then he was passed by everyone, and eventually he came into the pits. The team did send him back out again, but I'm not sure why they did that, as it was clear that he had a real issue, and eventually he parked up and was out of the race. A real shame, considering what happened in the F2 race, in this F2 race going forward. I think he could have been right there at the front, at the end, with his alternate strategy, because he was being told to stretch out his tyres longer than the others on his strategy, which, with considering the timing of the safety car, could really have helped him. Whilst Callum Ilott was struggling for pace towards the end of this stint, as you can see, here he is. He was held up by traffic, and then here he is getting passed by Yuki Tsunoda at the first corner. And I mentioned that there was a safety car, and the reason for that was Giuliano Alesi ground to a halt after an engine failure forced him to park up. Real shame for the HWA driver, but it brought out the safety car because the cars are not that easy to clear around here. Now, not many people actually pitted like I thought that they would, but Christian Lundgaard held the lead. But going into the first corner, there was drama, as you can see. They're all very bunched up. Guan Yu Zhu was the driver that was sitting the most pretty at this point, because he was on a different strategy. He was on the softer tyre, so he could have easily progressed. But as you can see, he got passed by Nikita Mazepin going into the first corner, and then this happened on the exit of turn 3, I believe it was. There was contact between Mick Schumacher, Guan Yu Zhu and Jack Aitken, which damaged the suspension on both Zhu and Aitken's car, and both were out of the race. Once again, unbelievably bad luck for Guan Yu Zhu. It seems that whenever he is in a good position, something happens to him. And that did not change. Whether it's a car failure or being taken out. And that's happened again. When is he going to get some luck? Callum Aylott was also caught up in the melee, and he had to pit for a new front wing, which meant that he was out of the points. The safety car came out, but on the restart, Nikita Mazepin took full advantage of the whole situation, managing to get down the inside of turn 1 and taking the lead. Luca Giotto got up into second, and poor Christian Lundgaard. He had done so well to lead all the way, but he just had nothing against all the drivers on fresher rubber, and he dropped to 6th in the end. Whilst, as you can see, Louis Delatres battled out with Felipe Drugovich for the final podium position. But in the end, it was Nikita Mazepin who won. Luca Giotto just managed to beat Delatres, who passed Drugovich, and then set about catching Giotto in the end, but he could not manage. So Nikita Mazepin won from Giotto. Louis Delatres finished in 3rd ahead of Felipe Drugovich. Mick Schumacher in 5th. Christian Lundgaard in 6th. Juri Vips finally took his first F2 points to finish in 7th. He's really acquitted himself well, having come in mid-season. Artem Markelov finished in 8th ahead of Marcus Armstrong and Jehan Daruvala. Nobuharu Matsushita finished in 11th ahead of Callum Aylott, who only finished in 12th. Pedro Piquet was 13th ahead of Sato Nissani. Tsunoda ticked and dropped to the rear of the field after getting hit by Yuki Tsunoda, who was penalised in the end. He dropped to the rear. Both dropped to the rear of the field, and Ticktum dropped down to the back because of his tyres. With Samaya as the last to finish, with Aitken, Zhu, Alesi and Schwartzman the final finishers. Well, not the final finishers, the drivers who did not finish. Whilst Mick Schumacher, he lacked pace in this race, but he really did well to take advantage of the safety car and everything. And all the kind, he was on the alternate strategy, and that enabled him to get up into 5th in the end. So, on reverse grid pole, it was Artem Markelov as a result of that race. He started from reverse grid pole. I need to get the proper slideshow up. Hang on a second. This is the first time doing it this way, so bear with me a moment. But it was right. May have to do without the picture run through for this. I'll try to do something about this, but it was Artem Markelov who had reverse grid pole, and after a very anonymous season that he has had, wherever F3 race 2 is. A very anonymous season that he had. He was on reverse grid pole. But on the start, Christian Lundgaard got a great launch and was able to get right alongside Artem Markelov. Juri Vips struggled off the line from 2nd on the grid, and he could not make use of it. But Lundgaard took the lead, and he was always going to struggle. Not always going to struggle, and he was always going to pull away. Whilst in the midfield, you had Schwartzman and Zhu fighting their way through the field after their bad qualifying. Schwartzman got a great start from dead last and was progressing his way up the order. He did use his tyres a bit, but was doing a really good job to progress his way up the order. As you can see, here you have Markelov battling it out with Delatrez. Delatrez eventually did manage to get past the HWA for second place. And then next in line to try to pass him was Jury Vips. The HWA seemed to be really struggling for pace this year, but Jury Vips could not quite manage to get round the outside, and contact was made, but eventually he made the move stick. And then Artem Markelov was under attack from the high-tech cars. I believe Mick Schumacher then got through, but then he made a mistake which allowed both of them through, and then there was contact as well, which damaged his wing, and that was that as far as his race was concerned. But speaking of the two high-techs, they battled it out going into the first corner, but then there was contact between Mazepin and Giotto going into the first corner after Mazepin locked up, and Giotto came off worse. He was in the gravel and into retirement. Mazepin eventually had to pit after... because they wanted to check if there was damage. And then came there was a virtual safety car, and after the restart, Guan Yu Zhu was charging his way through the field. Was Robert Schwartzman he made a mistake trying to pass Armstrong. Eventually managed to get through, but then and he looked like he might get into the points. But Marino Sato, who pitted under the virtual safety car, took full advantage and managed to get past quite a few drivers at the end. Whilst here you have the battle for second. Jury Vips was attacking Delatrez, but Delatrez stood his ground and defended the position. And it was Christian Lundgaard who took the victory in the second race. Redemption after the first race disappointment. Ahead of Louis Delatrez in second. Jury Vips finished in third ahead of Mick Schumacher in fourth. Guan Yu Zhu finished in fifth ahead of Callum Ilott, who managed to pass Deruvla at the end to finish in sixth. Then you had Deruvla finishing in seventh. Marino Sato finished in eighth. And Robert Schwartzman, despite not managing to get into the points, it was a valiant effort to get up to ninth after considering he started dead last. But the drive of the race had to go to Guan Yu Zhu, fighting his way from, I believe, 19th on the grid up to 5th. I believe he is the best on the grid right now at fighting his way through the field. Then it was Nissany, Armstrong, Piquet, Aitken, Matsushita. Drukovic dropped back after tyre issues. Then it was Samaya Tickton, Mazepin. Tsunoda had front wing damage after hitting Drukovic in the end. Markelov finishing 20th with Giotto and Alesi as the race's only retirements. In the drivers' standings, Mick Schumacher now holds a considerable advantage up front. He extended his lead. He really made use of Ilott and Schwartzman's issues, and he has extended his lead in the drivers' standings. He has extended his lead to 8 points back to Callum Ilott. Christian Lundgaard has moved in third ahead of Robert Schwartzman, who's dropped to fourth after a pointless weekend. Nikita Mazepin is in fifth after his win on Saturday. Then it's Tsunoda, Delatrez, Zhu, Giotto and Drukovic. But this has been a great F2 season. I mean, never before have I seen an F2 season where there is so much at stake. But whilst Formula 2 has 3 rounds to go, one series drew to a close this weekend. And that was the Formula 3 standings race series, which saw some great racing throughout the weekend. So, let's review that. Let's review Formula 3. So, it was actually the first racing action of the weekend, so there was a lot of eyes on it, and it was well received due to the way that it had that it saw racing, some great racing when people were expecting it to be tricky to overtake. So, off the line, Zendelli led the way. Logan Sargent managed to get his way up to fourth in the championship fight, with the 8-point gap that they had going into this race. But then Théo Pourchaire was on the charge and he then managed to get past Logan Sargent for 4th. And then at the front you had Jake Hughes and Narim Zendelli battling it out going into the first corner. The two drivers battled it out for quite a lot of the race, swapping positions, whilst Oscar Piastri was making his way through the field after his bad qualifying and was making his way towards the points. Whilst Zendelli and Hughes were battling it out up front, Frederick Vesti behind was closing. I mean, the leading pair of Zendelli and Hughes were swapping positions left, right and centre. But then Vesti got involved and was able to get past the Trident driver. And it wasn't long before he latched onto the back of Jake Hughes and was able to get past the HWA. And whilst Logan Sargent did not seem to have great pace towards the end of the race, as you can see here he is battling with Enzo Fittipaldi, but he eventually managed to get past the HWA driver. Jake Hughes was not finished up front, and he was putting Frederick Vesti under a lot of pressure, but Vesti managed, and he actually managed to get past before, but it was on the final lap where Frederick Vesti managed to get through, and he was able to take the lead when it mattered most, and he won the first race. He's had a very solid end to the season, has Frederick Vesti, ahead of Jake Hughes in second. Teo Pourchaire finished in third, which meant that he still was in contention going into the season finale, not with 9 points between him and the two Primas. Zendelli was finished in fourth, but Enzo Fittipaldi did actually manage to get back past Sargent in the end. And 6th place for Sargent with no fastest lap or anything meant that both him and Piastri, who crucially did not manage to get into the points and did not manage to get that reverse grid pole, were level on points going into the season finale. Then you had Alexander Smolia finishing in 7th, David Beckman 8th, Sebastian Fernandez in 9th, and Liam Lawson on reverse grid pole. Then you had Piastri for sure, Doohan, Hauger, Schumacher, Nannini, Caldwell, Malvestiti, Williams. Peroni had a tough race, finished in 30th. Then he had 20th after I believe he had contact. Then it was Dunner, Flörsch, Das, Novalak, Daleda, with retirements being Stanek, Belov and Viscal. So, going into the season finale, which would take place on Sunday morning, the two leaders, Sargent and Piastri, were level on points, with Teo Pourchaire with 9 points behind. It was set to be interesting, but considering the grid, you could safely say it was advantage Sargent at this point. So, race 2 there was a lot at stake in the second race. And at the start of the race, Liam Lawson managed to hold the lead going into the first corner from reverse grid pole. But there was drama immediately as Logan Sargent had contact with Fernandez and Zendelli. Both Sargent and Zendelli were sent into the gravel, and both were out of the race. Even though they were level on points, countback meant that Piastri would have had the advantage had they finished level. So you had to really feel for Sargent. He did a great run. It was an incredible run for him to challenge for the title. And it was a real shame that his title bid had to end that way. It was really sad for the Prima driver. So it would be safe to say that a lot of people would have thought it was over at that point. The safety car did come out, but as a result, and on the restart, I mean, it actually looks like a normal start considering how bunched up the field were, but F3 managed to get restarts right, unlike their bigger brothers. But Lawson held the lead going into the first corner and kind of disappeared off ahead of Alexander Smolia. David Beckman was holding third before he then managed to get past Smolia. And a lot of people would have thought that with Sargent out, that it would all be done. Well, that would mean it would be done. But Théo Pourchaire was making a late bid for the title. As you can see, here he is, getting around the outside of Alexander Smolia, who was really struggling and dropping down the order. And then he managed to get past Enzo Fittipaldi going into the first corner, with Oscar Piastri, I believe, in 10th at this point. It was, if he'd managed to get up to 3rd, he would be entitled. If he'd managed to get up to 2nd, he would be in title winning position. As you can see here he is getting past Fernandez. Whilst here Piastri is getting past Smolia. So at this point, Pourchaire, he needed 2nd place. And he did give it a good go to get 2nd, as Vesti did not put up much of a fight to his title contender teammate, because Piastri was behind Vesti, but Vesti eventually did not fight him. Théo Pourchaire was doing everything he could to close on to David Beckman's trident, but he could not manage. Liam Lawson won the race. I always feel sorry for drivers who take the win at the time where the title's secured, because no one, you get the fit, because it just feels like at this point they just don't get any attention. They just don't get any attention, and they must think no one cares about me. Sure, they must think I just won the race. Why doesn't anyone care about me? But Oscar Piastri then actually managed to get another position on the line from Sebastian Fernandez. And he crossed the line. I mean, had Pourchaire managed to take 2nd, that would have meant that he would have got the title on the line. But it was Oscar Piastri who was crowned Formula 2 champion, and a very deserving champion in a really close title fight that went right down to the wire. Liam Lawson won the race ahead of David Beckman. Théo Pourchaire gave it a really good go. And I think he should be really proud. He had a very strong end to the year, did Théo Pourchaire. Other than a bad first race at the Red Bull Ring, he was just on it since. He scored every race bar one from then on, and he gave it a really good go. I mean, a week or so ago, no one would have thought that he even had a chance. But he was so consistent towards the end of the season that he managed to give it a good go. But he could not get close to Oscar Piastri, and he's a thoroughly deserving champion. He won in the end by 3 points, and I believe in Australia he is being seen as Australia's next, could be possibly Australia's next Formula 1 star. Logan Sargent, looking at the race result, it was Liam Lawson who won ahead of David Beckman. Liam Lawson finished in 5th in the end of the standings. Théo Pourchaire finished 3rd ahead of Fittipaldi in 4th, who had a solid end to the season. Then in 5th place, it was Richard Verschoor ahead of Jake Hughes in 6th. Oscar Piastri's 7th place was enough to secure the title ahead of Sebastian Fernandez. Frederic Vesti finished in 9th, with Alexander Smolia taking the last point of the season. Then it was Doohan, Hauger, Peroni, Novalak, Nini, Caldwell, Dunner, Stanek, Schumacher, Viscal, Williams, Malvestiti, Belov, Flörsch, Das and Deleda, with Sargent and Zendelli the last of the retirements of the race. As I said, Piastri won the title. Are we doing a Formula 3 season review at some point? Probably, maybe over the next 2 weeks. Depends on how much time I have amongst all the other stuff. But I will be doing both a written and a visual season review for Formula 3. I'll be doing both a written and a visual season preview at some point. Oscar Piastri won the championship ahead of Théo Pourchaire in 2nd. Logan Sargent finished in 3rd, finishing. You had to feel for him the way that his title charge ended in the end. He gave it such a good go, and he also didn't even finish top 2. But it was good to see Logan Sargent was still very proud. The way that he posted on social media, he stated that he was still very proud of what he's achieved this year. and so he should be. He gave it a really good go, and he kept the title fight going to the last race, and only finished 4 points off the championship. Frederik Vesti finished in 4th, ahead of Liam Lawson in 5th. Liam Lawson had a few barren periods of bad luck, but he finished in 5th, but could not hold off Frederik Vesti. 3 Primas in the top 4 once again. Vesti had a very off middle of the season, but he had a really strong conclusion, taking 2 race 1 victories, and he managed to get up to 4th. Then in 6th place, he had David Beckman. He had a good, I think you can say, he had a good season. That remesh with Trident worked very well for him. Ahead of Jake Hughes in 7th, in what is expected to be his last Formula 3 season. Then you had Lorem Zendelli in 8th, Richard Verschoor in 9th, and Alex Peroni rounding out the top 10 after in a solid season that he had, much better season than he had last year. Whilst in the constructors, it was Prima who once again reigned supreme, ahead of Trident, who beat ART by 10.5 points. High Tech finished in 4th. They did not have as good a season as I thought that they would in the end. High Tech, I thought they had a very strong lineup, and I did not think that they were going to finish as low as 4th. Then in 5th you had HWA ahead of MP Motorsport. Then you had Campos Racing. Once again, Alex Peroni scored all of Campos's points, but he managed to but his points were enough to get them into 7th in the standings. Carlin finished in 8th in the end, ahead of Genza Motorsport, with Charouz finishing bottom of the table in a miserable season for them. In what really wasn't a good season for Charouz. So that is it from the Road to F1 review, and that is it from all the Tuscan Grand Prix coverage. And we will see the next live stream will be on Thursday, where we will have the midweek recap. And also, as I said, stay tuned for more content, such as maybe a driver predictions video. And then also, as I said, a full-on Formula 3 season review. And also, don't forget, the new RaceWeek website is going to be launched next week. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on Thursday. Goodbye.